And we are live. All right. Good morning, folks. Welcome to Coffee with Artists. My name is Rachel Wilkins. I am your host, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Julio Zarate. Julio, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you.
And let our viewers know where you're joining us from today.
Yeah, I'm in Eugene, Oregon. So just recently moved here. I was in LA, just outside LA for a couple of years. But now I'm in Oregon.
And I always feel terribly guilty when I interview my West Coast peeps because it is some ungodly hour, 8 a.m. in the morning. 7 a.m. I'm sorry. 7, 8?
No, it's 8. It just turned 8, yeah.
All right. I hope you have something strong in your cup. I have
I do.
my black coffee. What are we drinking?
Yeah, just black coffee. So it's
Good
my
stuff.
morning ritual.
Mm-hmm. I can't start my day out without at least 3 cups of black coffee. There's zero functioning without that. So
yeah.
So how are things in Oregon in the middle of this pandemic? How are you dealing with things?
Things are pretty good. I mean, like everyone, if you're, like I said, is like if you're being responsible and staying home, it's a definite change. I mean, been shut down, Oregon shut down, gosh, probably almost 6 weeks ago. So we've been sort of inside and kind of trying to operate and figure out life, inside for about 6 weeks. But one of the things that sort of helped me is I don't know if it's helped or not, but I've got a 10-month-old at home. And so, yeah, so he definitely, yeah, exactly. He keeps me on schedule for sure. So that sort of helped because, with the shutdown and the pandemic and having to be at home and no work and things being shut down, you kind of lose that sense of like your daily routine. So having him has definitely helped with that. So
I'm sure that keeps
keeping me busy.
Yeah, keeps you on your toes. Is this first child? Or
yes. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. How is it even possible to find any time to be creative with a 10-month-old? That's what
It's really hard. It's really hard. It's just been recently, I'd say in the last couple of months that I've been able to really find some time and space. Really, I think for right now it's mostly space and just making sure that I've got an area and then it's easily brought down. Like we can like put it up and bring it back down pretty quickly and pretty easily. From what I used to do, anyways, I would kind of set up and I'd take up a ton of space and I'd just leave it. And it was just one of those things I just kind of got used to doing that. And so with the baby, I was like, man, I can't do that anymore. It's like, I don't know how I'm supposed to do art because it was such a big part of like my process was to kind of just, it wasn't a mess, but it was a mess. It's just stuff everywhere and laid out and just waiting there because I do use a lot of oil paint. So it needs time to just sit and dry. And so, that's kind of like I just, get to a point and stop and walk away and then it'd be okay to sit there for the next time. I can't do that now.
I can relate on a little bit of a different level. I got a puppy not that long ago. And so, you call it mess. I call it organized chaos. My studio would have, garbage all over the place. And now I cannot leave anything laying around because he eats everything and anything. And plus I'm also more conscious about, the toxicity which is something we should be more conscious about anyway, but what kind of products that I'm using and glazes and all those kind of things. So I imagine having a baby is pulling that up by a billion.
Yeah, it's one of those things I never really thought about. I mean, it may have come up, thought about it a little bit, but it was never really a thing. And then now it's like reading everything and, making sure it's all safe.
Wow. Do you think becoming a parent has changed your how you look at your work or how you approach your work at all?
Yes, absolutely. A big part of what kind of fueled it, and it still does fuels my art is just sort of like how I experience life and the world and how I see it and trying to translate that. And so having this, this new person in my life definitely makes a huge difference and has me thinking a little bit more about sort of not necessarily like the way the art looks or like the process, but more of the subject matter a little bit. You know, I tend to do, and I've been sort of on a track of doing portraits, and usually they're portraits of females, and so now you know, I'm thinking more in terms of, you know, how I'm presenting like the human body and what it looks like, and so it's just a different thing. And I was sort of on that trajectory, I think, before, but now it's definitely taken it gets jump started a little bit, and now I'm thinking a little more about how to make a change, because I feel that way. It's not just because, you know, it's some moral thing. It's more of a, you know, I have this different feeling about it, so I want to figure out a way to make the art represent that, I guess.
And you know, like you said, it's you're somebody who's impacted by the surroundings, the life experience that you're going through, and I think a lot of us can relate to that. You know, it kind of comes through in your art, whatever you're going through at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You also are somebody that's moved around a little. You originally are from the Washington D.C. area,
Mm-hmm.
ended up on the West Coast,
Yep.
in California for a little while, and now you're up in Oregon. Would you say that those kind of geographical relocations have impacted, and can you see the change in your work from those different experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, you know, coming to Oregon is a huge one because, you know, when I was, you know, DC area, and, you know, growing up in general, my dad was military, so I moved around a bunch, but I called DC home. I was there through middle school and high school years and college, and sort of the thing that was like my first introduction into what I thought was like really awesome creative art was graffiti. And I didn't know any better. It was graffiti and cartoons, actually. So like Saturday morning cartoons and comic books, things like that. So those are the things that sort of like got me wanting to create art. And that sort of like city environment and the way, you know, the lines and color and all of that really made a difference. And then like going to LA was another big shot of that. And I think the work that I did in LA looked very LA in my mind, as far as like the colors. And now it's like I'm coming up here and everything's so green and everything. There's just trees everywhere and nature. And it's definitely made me sit back and think about it and want to change and shift gears there a little bit too. So what I've been doing recently is definitely has a little bit more of a, I would say, outdoorsy theme, even though if you looked at it, you probably wouldn't see that necessarily. But I feel it, and I can sense that change a little bit too, for sure.
That's awesome. Do you feel like, in terms of how creative you feel in different, do you feel that different from place to place? Like perhaps you're somebody who thrives in nature, or somebody who's like really energized by that city feel that maybe you had in LA?
Yeah, I think I would say probably that city feel probably gives me a little bit more, to be honest. The nature makes me a little bit more calm and relaxed and want to not necessarily do too much. It makes me want to be outside.
Yeah.
And like experience it differently.
Mm.
And I think there's part of that is just the wanting to be in the environment. But I was always like, it's just one of those things. Like I love painting landscapes, but I don't necessarily want to. I don't want to be my thing, like be a landscape painter. You know, it's like it's just one of those. And I've always kind of been like, I'd rather try to do something a little bit different than try to recreate what's outside. It's, you know, just go outside kind of a thing. So I think that's part of it.
So for somebody who's perhaps never seen your work before, just explain it to us. If you mentioned at the top it was mixed media, so just kind of a little bit of a description of, you know, how what your work is about.
Sure, absolutely. So I, you know, throughout college, so growing up, like I said, I was really influenced by graffiti and just comic books and that sort of art. And so I did a lot of drawing and a lot of sort of line work, which is what that's graffiti is about, just lines and bright colors, right? And so that's sort of like what my introduction was. So pencils, pens, markers, spray paint, those were sort of the media that I used. And when I got to college, I wasn't sure if I didn't consider myself an artist, so I didn't know that that was the path I wanted to take. I actually went in as a history major and took an art class my junior year just to see if I wanted to do it, and then I realized I really loved doing it and painting, and so I switched majors and decided to become an artist, and that's kind of how I went. But in that intro, I picked up oil painting. I'd never done it before, and I had no experience with it, and it was super challenging, and I was not very good at it. So I spent a lot of time really trying to get better at it. So I initially was just oil on canvas, and worked on like my theme was the human figure. I wanted to be good at painting the human figure in oil. It's when I looked at like the old masters, I was so taken by that and like how great those paintings looked, and the depth of all that. So I wanted to try to be like that. But it was a super challenge, but I think that's kind of what kept me going with it. And so that's sort of like what everything comes from with what I'm doing now, is that initial graffiti influence, and then the learning of the oil painting and really loving that and trying to use that as like kind of like a new language. And then now, there was a transition about 10 years after I graduated, because I was just continuing doing just oil on canvas, and that was it. And, I was stuck, and I felt very stale. I felt like I was just doing the same painting over and over again. And it was just the same, like a different version of some figure. And I was just I didn't know where to go from there. And so I kind of reminded myself, it's like, my initial love for this, for art, came from a different place than just looking at, old oil painters and trying to figure out the best way to, the best process of oil painting. So I took one of my paintings, and I was about halfway through, and this is also a problem for me, is I have a tendency of not finishing paintings. Like I get to a place, I'm just like, I don't know where to go. But so I had one of those paintings, and I was like, if I really, because then I was like, okay, how do we combine the two, right? And it was about like trying to marry, graffiti with like, what post-impressionist painters do. And it's like, how do we make those two fit on top of each other? And I thought it made a lot of sense, but I was never looked quite, it always looked like there was a big trend not too long ago of like people infusing graffiti art into their work, and I didn't want it to just be that. And I always thought that trying to just put graffiti on canvas was somehow like not true. Like it's not real graffiti. Graffiti is supposed to be on a wall outside, and you're not supposed to show it in a gallery. It's just, it kind of goes against the definition of what that is. And so I was like trying to figure out how to make it all work. And so I had done a couple of works that didn't quite work. And so I was like, if you're really going to do graffiti on a painting, you'll take your marker and you're going to write on top of that thing that you just made. and like the idea was like terrifying, and especially for an oil painter who like spends a lot of time trying to like render a figure and make it look right, and like all the layers that goes into it, and time to take a marker to it was like, it was tough, it was scary. And so, but I did it, and that was the first moment where I was like, I think I'm onto something, and I think I'm doing something right. And when I did it, it worked that first time. And so I've done plenty that didn't work. And that's the kind of risk with the process, with at least the way I used to, the old process was, you had to get the painting to a certain point, and then it was like, okay, now we have to go on top of it with the marker or the pen or pencil or whatever. And then the painting totally changes, and you need to have a pretty clear image in your mind of what this is going to look like at the end, to have the confidence to just go for it with the script or whatever you're going to put on top of it. So that's kind of what it is. So now it's like the paintings are the last several, the last, I would say, series were just portraits, and just like mostly headshots with the central picture painted in oil, and then the backgrounds and hair and details done in spray paint and pen, marker, charcoal, just all kinds of things that I have sort of like in my little toolbox of equipment that I use when I paint. But There's always sort of that like central theme of oil, and then kind of everything coming out after that.
It's an interesting kind of, I think you're a bit background. Maybe you can turn that down on the playback because I'm getting feedback.
Oh, sorry, hold on one sec.
I can hear myself.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right. Oh, I think it's still there. All right, how about now? That's better. There we go.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, it's interesting because when you think about the two mediums, I guess you could call it. So you're talking about oil paint, and it's very very classic, right? It's it's about the slow process, the patience.
Mm-hmm.
It's very permanent, right? It's a process that takes time, and then you think about how graffiti artists work. Like it's something super quick. It's done, in the shadows. It's something that's often like an illegal act.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you? Well, first of all, I would be interested to know: do you kind of foresee what it's going to look like before, like the graffiti angle, so the graffiti on top, or do you just kind of roll with it?
There's a little bit of both. Now I really try to sit down and think about what it's going to look like at the end. When I first started, it wasn't that way. I did two kind of different processes. The first one was I would take a canvas and then just get my spray paint out and sort of like do a background. Right. So the canvas started with the background, and then I would paint over top of it with the oil, which is in parts because it's hard to actually put oil on top of that surface, the sprayed surface sometimes, and it's really hard to see where you're going. So like I'd have like blocked out parts where the oil would go onto the like fixed canvas or whatever. And but there's a part of it that is like I need to kind of have an idea, because the process of putting the paints down need to go at certain times. So I have to kind of have an idea of like what goes first, what goes second, what goes third. But at the end, because it's all sort of like trying to get them all to work together, and I'm pretty big on trying to like make the painting balance with like light and color, and so that's a big part of like what I'm trying to do too. It's not just like I used to think anyways that the central image, the person in the picture was not as important as the light and the color, and like so it was like almost like it could be anything in there. In my mind it was more about the process of how I was applying the paint than anything. And you were right on with pointing out how graffiti is really fast and oil is really slow, and it was that idea of like trying to make it this similar process. And so it was like fast with the graffiti and then slow with the paint, and then trying to like it was about like kind of almost like a snapshot. So one day was graffiti day, one day was a oil day, and then graffiti day, oil day, and then like at the end it was about kind of like putting it all together with either marker, so like a final layer of like you're putting the marker on, or finishing touches with oil like around to make sure that it's all kind of connected. But yeah, it's it's evolving. Kind of every time I do it changes just a little bit. But there is a sense of sort of like improvisation a little bit when it comes to how it all ends up, because the color really is the thing that dictates it. Because sometimes when you have an idea of like how, at least the way I've been applying the spray paint, it turns out a little different every time, and then than what I'm expecting. And so when the color is a little different, so sometimes I use the spray paint as color for the hair, for a lot of the models. And so if the light and the color of the hair is a little different than what the actual light of the color of the hair is in the model image that I'm using, then I've got to change the model, right? And I've got to either change the position of the model or where the light is actually coming from. So it's things like that where it's like, sure, I have a kind of the idea, but so much changes from the beginning to the end of that. whole painting.
Right. And I've worked with a lot of these saying materials like we considered art materials like the paint pens and the spray paint, and I always enjoyed them, but they're definitely very unforgiving.
Yeah.
If you get something wrong, it's done, right? It's like you can't really go back and kind of undo your work like you maybe could with oil or you could even with acrylics. But there's kind of an element of I guess risk in that, and I think that can be part of the fun. Have you had any experiences though where you've it pains me even to think about this, but you've spent hours on an oil painting and then you've gone in and you've been like, oh no.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and every time I do it, it's a little more and more scary because I feel like I'm getting better at it. And so now it's like riskier somehow because I'm like, you spend a lot of time and you're like, this is looking really good. And then it's like, well, I've got this one thing I've got to do to it. And if it doesn't work, then the whole thing can get messed up. And I've had a couple moments where I've had that and was able to kind of like maneuver some things around and change it a little bit so that it worked. But there have definitely been some that it just didn't. I had to start over, or had to like put that away and just completely cover it or get rid of it or do something totally different than what I had initially hoped for.
That's pretty devastating when you've spent so much time, but I think that's what we're always doing, right? We're always experimenting. Bless you. Always like little mad scientists in the studio, trying and failing and picking ourselves up and trying again. But I can imagine that would be a little bit of a heartbreak to see, to spend so much time and then think, oh no, there's no do button in the studio, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that it definitely is tough. One of the paintings I just finished recently is actually a canvas that I've had for, I think, like 4 years. And it was because I messed it up and I had to like redo it. I had no idea. And I was so upset by it that I just didn't even want to look at it. And so it just kind of sat there and eventually I think I just I just sprayed over all of it and then just redid it. But there's still like, you can still see some of the remnants of the old painting in the background. So it actually like part of that kind of, it gives it a little bit of a deeper meaning and a little more depth than just the texture of the painting. So.
Right. I have a few like that are sitting in my studio that they kind of pay me to look at. Yeah. I'll pick it up one day, but not yet. I'm not ready to look at it just yet.
Yeah.
So take me back to kind of your early days. So you talked about growing up in the Washington, D.C. area. Were you creative from a young age?
I would say no. And to this day, I don't necessarily feel super creative or like art is necessarily like I'm a true artist, because you hear a lot about it with like young people who are just like naturally talented. I wouldn't necessarily call myself that. I've been attracted to art and artistic people and artistic things since I was very young. But my initial trying to get better at, so my mother is a great artist. She can draw anything she sees very well, and then my cousin is very similar, and so I would see them growing up and I'd ask them to draw me things because I thought it was cool, and they would do it, and I would try and it was terrible. So I from that moment it was like I just worked really hard to try to figure out how to draw, and so that was sort of the beginning of it, was just trying to kind of be like them and work hard to do, like, for me it's a lot about like seeing something and wanting to do it, like be able to do it. And so that's really kind of how it all started, and I think I kind of did it almost I wouldn't say as a secret, but it was one of those things where I wasn't like outwardly like sharing art with anybody or doing a lot of it. Took art classes, in high school, but it was, I think everybody had to. It wasn't one of those like I looked for opportunities to go do this stuff. And by the time I got to my senior year of high school, I started getting better at it. I enjoyed it and I was having fun with it. So that's when I think things started it became a little bit more of a part of who I was, like as my identity, but definitely not as a young person.
But it's interesting. Grew up with was creative herself, and did she champion and kind of support what you were doing creatively?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think she really enjoyed that part of me and that I did that. And it was cool to have that. Because I don't know that I would have kept on doing it if not for that, right? Having that little extra, like, not necessarily congratulations, but just that support, right?
Right. So you had a whole different kind of life forming alongside your creativity. You're an athlete. You swam, and you now teach. You're a swimming coach, right? So can you tell us
Yep.
kind of how those two worlds collide? Perhaps what the parallels are, and
Yeah,
a little bit of insight.
absolutely. So yeah, that was so swimming and like athletics, especially when I was younger. That's kind of like what my identity was, right? It wasn't being an artist; it was that. And I swam. I decided to make swimming my full time sport thing, or extracurricular activity I did outside of school when I was about 12 or 13, and did that all the way through college. And after I graduated, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I had my degree in art, but I just didn't know direction. I didn't know if I want to go to more school because I didn't go to an art school. I went to just a regular college and got this art degree. It's like maybe I go to an art school and dive more into that, but I wasn't sure, and so I asked the college swim coach if I could stick around and coach for a year just to see if I liked it, just to give me something to do. And I did that and fell in love with coaching. And really, what it is about coaching is it's about, like, for me, the reason why I do it is for helping people. It's really kind of like a calling. I love the sport of swimming, and I like being competitive, and I like what it does for you as a person, like the work ethic that it can create and the lessons it teaches you about life. But it's really more about helping young people. And because my coach, when I was in middle school and high school, did such a amazing job and really kind of kept me on the right path, because I definitely had plenty of opportunities. My parents divorced when I was 13 or 12, going into 13, and I was doing a lot of things I shouldn't have and kind of acting out. And they probably don't know this, but I was definitely not doing what I was supposed to do. And swimming kind of helped put me on the right track. And I know for a fact, if it weren't for my coach and my connection with that sport, I wouldn't be here now. Like, it definitely helped straighten out my life. And so that's kind of why I do what I do and why I've chosen to do it. But as far as art, like, it's always been, the lessons from swimming recently have been such a huge thing for me when it comes to art. When I got out of college, like I said, I was in that rut where, I didn't know what direction to go in. And I didn't know what to do as far as like my themes for my painting, or what my purpose was, like why even do it. And I was always waiting for some sort of like inspiration to paint. And so I would be like weeks and months without doing anything. And when it comes to like swimming and training and getting better at athletics, like, you can't wait till you're inspired to do it. If you want to be good at it, you just have to get up and go do it. And so that lesson went a long way at that turning point of like me doing art, is that idea that I can't just wait till I feel like, oh, I'm inspired. Let's go paint. This feels great. And I've got an idea. I need to go do it. Sometimes you just need to go sit down and start painting or start drawing. And sometimes you don't have an idea in your head, but you develop one. Or sometimes you just don't feel it. And I know when I was younger, I felt like if I was like not in the right mood, then the painting wasn't going to be as good. I think maybe there's a tiny bit of truth to that, but I think you can kind of work yourself into that feeling. Like, if you sit down and start it and get into it, you start feeling better about what you're doing, and you get more into the work that you're doing. So that was like the big, I think, connection and takeaway I took from my training and coaching. But one of the other kind of neat things, so my first job was in St. Mary's, Maryland. So it was Southern Maryland, it was a small school. they just built this huge swimming facility, and they had this like extra room that was kind of empty. It was just storage. And so I asked the coach if I could take that room over and just put my artwork there and like use it as like a studio. And he said, sure. So I was like not expecting him to say yes to that at all. And so once he said that, I was like, this is great. So I had everything at one place. So like I'd go to work, and then I like swimming and like coaching can be pretty stressful because you're dealing with people and you're dealing with parents and families. And so there's a lot of like, and you're sort of like, it's not customer service, but it sort of is. You know, you're serving people and helping people, and you're like at their call, and like, and so there's stress there. And so I go into that little studio area pretty much every day to kind of de-stress. And I use that a lot now. Like whenever my kind of 9 to 5, which is swim coach, it's not really a 9 to 5, gets me like really worked up or stressed out. This is, you know, going to paint and going to kind of get my mind right by getting away from the world and being able to just focus in on one thing is huge for me as far as like my own like you know, mental health and really feeling good about, you know, what I was doing and where I was. It really helped kind of center me, so that like if not for that moment with, and that was like right at the kind of like that turning point with what I was doing too, it just all kind of like fit in at the right time. So yeah, it's been a big part. They've been kind of like interwound because they're such a big part of my life. So
what I'm getting from you there is kind of discipline and structure, right, in both areas, right? And I think that discipline is something that a lot of us as creatives struggle with, and I 100% relate to the, you know, waiting for that divine inspiration to hit you before you actually pick up a paintbrush. And that, you know, I've definitely gone through phases myself where, you know, I've been really unproductive creatively because of that. But you're right. Sometimes once you just kind of force yourself into that structure of, you know, you paint no matter what, you can then become inspired. Like it can come from just the process of putting, you know, paintbrush to canvas, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
What would you say were your kind of biggest influences? Was there any, you know, apart from kind of the familial influences, was there any creative influences that you looked at or aspired to be like, or any famous artists that you know still today perhaps inspired by?
Oh yeah, I all of them. Like there's so many. A lot of the I was talked about sort of postmodern or post-impressionist painters, excuse me, are really like huge influences, because I think at that point in painting, so I do like all the old masters, like you know, Renaissance painters and beyond, when it comes to sort of just their process of oil painting and you know what they're doing with the human figure. That's huge, because I paint the human figure, and so I need to look at that as, you know, that's kind of like the pinnacle in a lot of ways of oil painting and painting the human figure. So there's influence there for sure. But for me, I don't like, for me personally, I love looking at like photoreal paintings. And, you know, that stuff is great. But that's when I'm actually doing my process of painting and paint application. I like the way the line looks, and I like the application of the paint. I like being able to see the paint on the canvas. And so when we get into that, like impressionist to post-impressionist style painting, where it's like it's really about the paint and the color, and that's really where I'm drawing a lot of my oil painting inspiration from. Recently, I've been pushing a little more towards being a little more realistic, only because I think this is more of a like result of feedback and kind of what I feel like I've heard from our critics and you know, peers, that because sometimes the figures can look a little too abstract, or because, you know, some of the paint application is done a certain way, it doesn't look like I have as much control as it's not as purposeful. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a couple paintings that show that I know what I'm doing, and then I'm going to go back to what I was doing. but that's kind of what I've been doing the last couple paintings. But a lot of those, so like I think I'm trying to think of some really, like Francis Bacon was one of my, like I love looking into his work. I love, that type of, not just the way it looks, but exactly like his whole idea of like how he's putting the paint down, and the immediacy of it. And that idea too also, I think, goes back to correlates with the graffiti. And kind of one of the things that I've been looking recently at, which is pretty neat, is like I've also, like someone like Jackson Pollock recently has been really interesting. I never really was a huge fan necessarily. I mean, I appreciate it and where he fits in, the lineage of like painting and where painting is going and where it's been, and I think it's brilliant. But I never really understood it and saw any connections. But when we're thinking about, so one of his motivations, it was like this improvisational painting and how it connects to like jazz music, right? So my graffiti comes out of hip hop and hip hop music, and so I'm thinking about this connection of him with jazz and graffiti and hip hop, and how am I, like, what is the structure? So jazz is very improvisational. There's some improvisational moments in hip hop, but a lot of it is structured. There's a structure to it, right? And so I'm trying to make that similar connection with when I'm looking at my paintings. So with the line, so a lot of the paintings, like the backgrounds with some of my script, anytime I have script in it, for the most part, it's in lines. There are horizontal lines that go across. That's usually how you see graffiti on a wall. It's like they're just blocked out, right? It's structured. It looks chaotic, but there's a structure to it, and there's a process, a very specific process, especially when it comes to like big graffiti pieces, like when certain lines go down, how you fill things in. There's a lot to it. And so taking like inspiration from Jackson Pollock and how he was able to sort of almost interpret jazz music is kind of similar to what I'm trying to do now with trying to interpret hip hop music into paintings, and having a flow to it, and having a improvisational style within a structure is sort of how I look at all my paintings now. So he's been like recently a really neat, like, it was kind of like an aha, like, oh, this is kind of neat how there's this correlate, and this is a direction I can go in with these paintings that make more sense, it's more clear to me and make way more sense.
I the connection of music to art, and I cannot paint without music. And
yeah, no, it's huge for me too.
For me, I'm a huge, Jackson Pollock was really probably the reason I picked up a paintbrush in the first place. But it's you can feel the energy when you sit in front of one of his paintings. Like, it's not a painting. There's just this energy there and life that comes out of it. Like, and it's the story, and you kind of understand a little bit more about the frenzied person that he was when he was creating this. Like, you can feel that. It's powerful. So do you, I mean, is there an element, sorry, there's a comment here. Hold on one second. Jazz and art, I love it. When did 30 days, 30, when you did 30 days, 30 paintings, what was your playlist to keep you moving?
It's good. That's cool. Yeah. I listened to a lot of actually Radiohead during that time. I mean, Radiohead's probably been like especially when I was in college, was like, anytime I was in the studio, I had at least that. There's always this is usually a playlist, like a mix, and so there's a heavy dose of that. I listen to a lot of hip hop, so just whatever it like pops up on my iPod. I don't it's iPhones now, right? And so that was like a big part then, and like it still kind of comes in now. But I think then it was Dave Matthews. I was listening to a lot of Dave Matthews, Radiohead, hip hop. Oh, and the Smiths. That's been like recently. I got a Smiths album. I've enjoyed them for a long time, but I got an album recently, and I've been listening to that a lot. But during that 30 days, I'm pretty sure that was pretty heavy Radiohead Radiohead time.
When did you do 30 days, 30 paintings? Was it recent?
That was actually, I was living in North Carolina. So I moved from DC area to North Carolina, and then went from North Carolina to California. Now I'm in Oregon. But I did that when I was there. I was there for about 2.5 years, but similar time that I was in LA. Yeah, that was a fun, it was way harder than I thought it was going to be. And I was like, this was also like, I just moved there, and I had not done anything in a while, and I was kind of not feeling it. Like I didn't know where to start, and I wasn't motivated, and I wasn't excited, and I was trying to get, a hold of like being in a new city. And so I was like, you know what? I've heard this idea. I'm going to do it. I think it's a good idea. And so I started it. And after the second day, I was like, what am I doing? So it was too much, I thought. But I got it done. And it was because, they were smaller pieces. They have to be, right? But every one was a great, like, it really taught me a lot about my process and how to make the bigger scale paintings, because I used like different methods every time, and tried to come up with different ways to apply the paint, or different, like, techniques. And it was a really good experiment on how to, like, really how I was going to go about creating my new work. And you had to do it, and you had to do it fast, and you had to have your idea and go for it, and whatever came out. And you hope that it turned out okay. So I would spend, those paintings I would spend about 2.5 to 3 hours on. So I'd get home from work. Yeah, I'd get home from work, and as soon as I got home from work, I would start, and I would try to be done like before midnight. So it's like I need to get something done and finished and out there.
Were you working in oil at the time, or was that?
Pardon?
Were you working in oil?
No. So that was, so we did, there were some oils, but some of it was drawing. It was graphite, ink, spray paint, acrylic paints, watercolors, markers. Like I did everything. Like, so within the 30, there was a little bit of everything in there, and almost all of it was mixed media. And that's when I was like, mixed media is the thing I'm doing.
I love the concept of doing 30 days. I think that really pushes you to push through your boundaries and kind of break down those walls of resistance that we all kind of experience. I don't know whether you've read it, but I'm currently reading the Artist's Way. It's a great book, and it's kind of talks about breaking through those barriers that we set, those fears that we put on ourselves. And one of the acts that they suggest that you do each day is to just take a notepad and to write like a stream of consciousness, whatever is on your mind, for 3 entire pages, just to clear out that garbage, because we just put these restrictions on ourselves creatively, like, that voice that's like, oh, it's not good enough, it's not this. Doesn't matter, you just do it no matter what, right? This exercise is, you just get it on paper. It doesn't matter whether it's good, bad, ugly, whatever, and you don't look at it the next day. You just start over. And I kind of feel like that's a similar process with painting, right? You're not doing it for any reason. It's not that you're going to show this particular piece. You're creating from your soul, from your heart. And sometimes that's probably where the best work can come.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's some of those little pieces that I did, I really loved. Like, they turned out really great, and it was it was definitely exactly like you said. Yeah, it was a cool process. And I was actually thinking about doing one again, because I'm sort of in a similar boat now, like having moved to this new place, and especially with my baby, it's like it's hard to find time, and it's hard to like sit down and really like think about like a big painting, because you sit down and think about a big painting, it can be intimidating, right? And you're like, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of work. And so with that project, it's just like I don't have time to think about it. I just have to go, grab my whatever I'm going to paint on, and just go and see what happens. So
that's awesome. All right, so there's a second question from Jan. Hi, Jan. I moved from DC to New Jersey. How was creating in DC different than creating in California or the Carolinas? We touched on this a little bit earlier, but you want to just give a little summary on that?
Yeah. So I think it was more about, the, like, for me, like I said before, I take a lot from like my life and like what's happening to me currently, and I'm very visual, and so like what's around me influences me a lot. And I think, especially now when I look back at the work that I did at each place, and like the way it looks, and then two, sort of what the themes of those paintings were, you can really see, the difference between the locations I was at. But I think at the time I wasn't thinking about it. I didn't know that it was affecting me like that. So it wasn't like a conscious, like, oh, like I'm seeing something different in LA, so I need to paint that way. I think it was more like I'm being kind of influenced by this, by either the people or the atmosphere or the environment, and it's coming out in a certain way. So I don't know, like it wasn't consciously like, I want to, being in LA, I want to have a little bit like more of a grittier feel, because some of those, if you go to downtown LA where all the artists are and stuff, it's like there's a grittier feel about just in that area and that environment than, where I lived in the South Bay in California. So that's like just outside of LA. It's by the beaches. And so like that little area is the opposite of gritty, really. It's just a nice little beach town. And so it's a different feel. And so some of those paintings that I have that kind of like a little bit of that juxtaposition of like, oh, we're at the beach, but it's also very urban. And then with DC, I spent a lot of time in that school in Southern Maryland, and that was pretty rural. So that influence of being there was almost more of like wanting to get out of there, because I loved being in Southern Maryland for the time, but I was there for too long, and there was a lot of me that wanted to be outside of there. So Southern Maryland, the school that I was coaching at, was about an hour and a half, 2 hours south of DC. And so I would live, where I grew up in Maryland, was a lot closer. So going back and forth to DC was much easier. And so I think it was more about like me longing to be in that area, in that DC area. So it was trying to like look more like I was there than actually being there. So yeah, I think it's hard to say, but that's probably how I feel about it.
LA is such a great fun. I was surprised. I remember the first time I went out there, I had this kind of idyllic, image of what I thought California was going to be like. But it really is an interesting place. I mean, you have such poverty and such a huge homelessness problem
Mm-hmm.
in these kind of tent cities, and then you turn less than kind of a mile away, and you're in Beverly Hills with these billion-dollar mansions, and it's just
Yeah.
even just on the coast, like the comparison between Venice Beach and Santa Monica, which are right next door to each other, and it's totally night and day.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so crazy, and the like the disparity, that money disparity is it's insane. I mean, it's crazy expensive to live there, and that's part of the reason why I'm not there anymore. I loved being there because there was it's such a neat area, and there's like almost no place like it, for lots of reasons, but it's just way too expensive. And that disparity and that chain, like the difference between the super rich and like the Hollywood people versus like everybody else, was like was kind of over it a little bit. And so yeah, it's like if you could be there without all that, it would be great, but yeah.
Yeah, Venice Beach was the one that was kind of jarring for me. I spent some time there when I was out there for a conception show, and I just took myself there for the day, and walk around kind of the canal area, and it's gorgeous. And you look at the price of these properties, and they're like $20 million, right? Gorgeous little villas, kind of on the canal, and then you walk onto the pier in the evening, or just the boardwalk area, and it's like pretty dangerous. There's drugs, and there's a lot of homeless, and there's a lot of crime around those areas, and it's just it's kind of jarring and shocking to see.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you grew up in a military family. What
Mhm.
do you and that you obviously moved around a little with that. What do you think that gave you in terms of strengths and perhaps any challenges that came with that as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I as a when I was younger and when my parents were still together and we were moving around a lot, I was born in New Jersey. We lived in Virginia, uh, Maryland, Texas, California,
Wow.
back to Maryland. Like we went around the country a couple times, and so I think I went to. I think I counted it up once. It was like 11 different like elementary schools,
Oh, wow.
and and I think the most challenging part of it and was never having like friends. It was one of those things and it's still one of those things I would say I still struggle with because I anytime I would be at a place long enough to like develop good friends, I would leave.
Mm.
And so I felt like I could never like make good friends because I was like I didn't want to get to a point where I knew somebody too well that I'd be too upset to leave. And then the other thing was being new and being Hispanic, going to a lot of these places because, we're going. My my father's like he was so my father's from Mexico. He was born in Mexico City and um, came to the U.S. and joined the military as part of way to kind of earn his citizenship, which he has, which is awesome. Awesome way to do it too, I think. But so because of that, we're super poor and we're living in like the poorest places of every little city that we go to, and uh, and so you get like when you're the new guy and you move into places like that, you have to like stick up for yourself or you're gonna get beat up or picked on or so it's like there's a lot of that going on too. So me trying to like stick up for myself and like defend myself lots of places, lots of fights, and then like not trying to make friends was like that was like the hardest part. So like when I when I became a teenager, my parents split. I was like, I'm never joining the military. I'm never gonna like if I have a family, I'm not gonna have them go through that kind of thing. I want to like have a home, and because that was the big thing I felt like I missed out on was like having like a place that I can like call home and like where I'm from. I call that DC area Maryland because I did spend my high school years there and it feels home to me. So but I think as far as like strength from that, like I feel capable of sort of kind of doing and being anywhere. Like I can go like I've been able to see a lot of stuff and I've experienced a lot of things that probably a lot of people haven't. And I know that most places like are the same. There's differences, but you're going to a place, there are people there, and you're gonna have to work and be a part of a society no matter where you're at. So like my perspective on being like finding like the perfect place, I guess, to live is probably maybe a little different than most. I think some people really try to like you know they idealize certain places or think certain places are going to be great and where they are right now isn't great. I want if I could only be here. I don't feel that way, and I don't know that I've ever felt that way because I've always been wanting to just find a home base and had been a lot of places and know that pretty much every place I've been has been kind of similar in a way. I mean, obviously it's way different to be in LA than it is to be in Southern Maryland and Charlotte and um,
Pretty much.
yeah, yeah. But when you're with people, and people tend to be similar, and so I think that's kind of like my big takeaway. I got stronger for having to kind of deal with that, and but I still, again, I think there are probably some emotional issues that I've got to deal with still. Like I said, like the friend thing. I've got some really close friends that I really love, but I don't do a really good job of communicating with them. And I think that probably part of that comes from that. From how I grew up. So
Well, first of all, I'm sorry that you had to do those things that sound very troubling as a young person trying to adjust in a new place and then be met with a whole host of challenges. That must have been really difficult. When as a child of an immigrant family from Mexico, and
Mm-hmm.
now as a grown man watching what's happening in this country,
Yeah.
especially the way that immigrants are, just blacklisted and treated, and
Mm-hmm.
this administration, whatever your politics,
Sure.
we don't have to go down that rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
yeah, yeah.
It's a clear, just absolute, the black sheep are the Mexicans, the way this president treats immigrants. And how do you feel about those DACA children, the dreamers, those kids that really just want an opportunity to work hard and be American and
Yeah.
build a life? Like, how, as somebody who's gone through that experience and the challenges, how do you feel about that today?
No, absolutely. I think what they're doing is awesome, and it's hard. Like, I think people don't understand like the challenges that come with it, and how, like, for me personally, there's I've been pretty lucky, like the DC area is pretty diverse, and so you get some people who are very open, and you don't that there's racism everywhere. And going through my like moving around through the country, especially as a younger person, I saw it a lot. You hear it a lot. I think one of the things I learned when I was really young, and like something that my parents taught me. So I speak Spanish. I'm pretty fluent. I'm way out of practice because I don't speak it enough. But I understand it totally and I speak it. But it was really important for my mother and my father that English was first and I spoke English well, that I had no accent, and that, because the thing was, like, everywhere I go, because I'm dark, and they're just gonna think I'm Mexican, I'm an immigrant, and I can't speak English and I'm stupid. Like, that was like that's the first impression they're gonna have of you. So you have to be like beyond that. You have to speak clearly and eloquently, and you have to know what you're doing, and like be a certain person, that's above that, because otherwise you're always going to be looked down on. And so that's like, and I've learned that as a young kid, and it's and the sad thing is it's true, and I felt that even to this day. And it's different in the places you go and where whatever part of the country you're in, for sure. But it's just kind of the reality of it. And I think the temperature of the country now is a little worse in that sense when it comes to that kind of thing, because people who do feel that way, and it's not a lot. I mean, it's not. I would say it's not the majority. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but right. But the majority of the people that I am around and the people that I know aren't like that, and so. But it's I think the people who do feel that way are a little bit more emboldened and more ready to, say something negative or think something negative about you when they don't know you. So it's tough. I think one of the things that I've been lucky in my life is I've been surrounded by some pretty good people, and I've the sport that I'm in and the people that I'm around, and the where I work. They've been extremely accepting and kind, and never have, aside from maybe a couple instances in my like working life, have felt that. So it's there's it's a weird time. I'll just say that it's a very weird time.
And I think when the messaging coming from the leader of the free world is just so negative, whatever anyone thinks of him, and I think we can all agree that it's very negative rhetoric that is delivered pretty much on a daily basis, and has been particularly disparaging towards the Hispanic community. How, like you say, people are emboldened. The people who perhaps have this underlying racism, they're now emboldened to get behind a keyboard, just be mean. Really, that's what it is. It's and so many times I think when we have an opportunity to just sit down and have conversations with each other, like, I think sometimes if you are face to face with one of these people who perhaps is very bold and mean online, sometimes just a conversation, and realize that we all share similar values, we all share similar wants and needs. We want our family to grow up safe, we want to have healthcare, we want to be comfortable. And it's just, I think there's just historically been this desire to blame whoever other may be at that time, on why you are suffering, or why
Right.
your partner has been laid off. And right now in this country, it seems to be at the Hispanic community, and obviously African American community as well. It's
Right.
depressing. So I'm sorry that you experienced that and that you continue to experience that. It's troubling. And I think of those kids, particularly, the DACA kids, the dreamers. And actually knew somebody who was a dreamer and had a really promising career ahead of him. And just to have the rug pulled from beneath you when you've been here since you were kind of a 5-year-old child, and be
Yeah.
told that you're not an American. And
Yeah. When I heard that, I couldn't believe it. Like I just was like, I couldn't believe it. I didn't understand it, and I was just like shocked, that could even be a thing. Like anybody could want to do that and be willing to do something like that. It was kind of shocking.
well, hopefully we'll see some change in that area. So
Yeah.
a couple questions. Anyone who has a question for Julio, please jump in now. Okay, Jan, if you could hang one piece of your art in anyone's home, person can be alive or dead, whose house would you choose, and what would your message speaking through your art be? Great question, Jan.
Ooh,
Jan has the best questions.
that's a really good question. Um, hmm. So this is really tough. I think so. I don't know that I have someone. Actually, yeah. So this is kind of personal, right? Uh, so Dave Matthews. It would be Dave Matthews. And it's a weird pick, I think. But so when I was as a teenager, because of parents divorcing and because of just all the things that are going on in my life, and everybody's going through teenage years struggles, right? And it's not an easy time and adjusting with things. And I was pretty down, and I didn't realize that I was actually probably pretty depressed from then all the way through college. And it was a moment in college that I like really opened up to a really great friend of mine and was able to talk about all the things that was like that had happened to me growing up. With when my parents were together, when they divorced, all that stuff. So able to come out and really like have some sort of therapy with this person, right? Really changed my life. But just prior to that, like when music really started to make a real impact in my life was hearing Dave Matthews, like the first album that he put out. I don't know what it was. I don't know why. But it was the first like music that kind of like really spoke to me and just made me feel so much better. Like it was the first thing that like actually like helped my emotion, like me emotionally. And it was just one of those things where it was like, however upset I was or however sad I was, and like I felt like it was speaking to me, at this cheesy as that sounds, it's like it was true. And it really changed me and helped me feel so much better and so much more positive about life. So I'd love to like have him have something of mine and that painting to say exactly that, a lot of what that album meant to me was being able to see, throughout all the hardships that you go through or things that happen in your life, that there's still, beauty and positivity in the world. And that, if you can just kind of like tap into that optimistic side of you, that things are going to be better. And so that would be like what the painting was about and symbolized. And that's exactly what it would be.
Well, I think that we need to find a way to get Dave to hear this, and we need to manifest this to the universe. Hey,
Yes, I'll put it out there.
do it. Stranger things have happened. So Dave Matthews, if you're watching this, Julio has an incredible story, and you were part of that inspiration. So let's try and make that happen. All right, folks. Well, Julio, please, it was such a pleasure to have you. Please let people know where they can find out more about you, where they can purchase your work.
Yes, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. Pretty sure my Instagram handle is Julio L Zarate, all one word. And all my stuff is on Instagram. Most of my recent stuff is up there. You can find all the work and see what it looks like, and you can also link to my website via Instagram. I'm also on Facebook under Julio Paints. If you look through Facebook under Julio Paints, I have similar stuff. So what's on the difference between the two sites? The Julio Paints stuff tends to be has a little bit more. The Instagram, I haven't been recently as putting as much stuff on there. But both will link to a website, which I'm actually trying to retool right now. You can connect through that, and you can also just direct message me via either Facebook or Instagram on purchasing any work or any commissions, because I'm also open to that, since some of my work is portrait work. I am open to that as well. I've done a couple of those, so if that's something you're interested in, then yeah, feel free to hit me up.
Awesome. And is there a web address I can put in the comments right here?
Yes, it is Julio. Hold on, let me make sure of this for sure. So for the website, it is juliopaints.com.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that's right there in the comments, folks. So go ahead and check out the website. Obviously, give Julio a follow on Instagram and on Facebook. Such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for being so open, and we covered a whole array of topics today. And
Yeah.
I love these conversations because we really get to into the mind of the artist. So thank you for being so open and sharing your story.
Absolutely. I really appreciated this. Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun, and yeah, I'm psyched to do it. And just like one last thing, so just to kind of go back on that, we're talking about being an immigrant and like that experience. Some of the stuff that I'm doing next. So one of the things so like the connections, I'm kind of continuing on with the next theme I'm hoping is about sort of cultural appropriation, and so but kind of doing it like in reverse, right? So like a lot of people, you talk about cultural appropriation as like taking African American culture and making it like American culture, and like just taking it away and claiming it as something else, right? So in lots of ways, and I kind of like made this connection not too long ago about like what the painting that I'm actually doing is, because it's like master painters, like that's European culture. That's not necessarily my culture, right? So like I'm stealing that and taking it back over for like urban culture or whatever. So I'm gonna be kind of like delving into that idea a little bit more with the new stuff. So hopefully that turns out pretty cool. But that's kind of what I'm gonna be doing next.
Well, I look forward to seeing your progress, and please keep us updated. And maybe once you're done with the series, we can have you back on, and we can talk about it.
Sweet. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, folks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We will be back again tomorrow for Coffee with Artists, same time, 11 o'clock. And thank you for joining us today.